The system doesn't break when you rebel, it adapts. It gives you a new identity, one that feels independent, but is still predictable. So you keep thinking you're waking up when you're just switching roles inside the same structure. The real shift is much quieter than that. It happens when validation stops mattering, when comparison stops making sense, when approval feels irrelevant. And that's dangerous, because the moment you no longer need the system, it no longer knows how to control you. And that's the point most people never reach. A quiet fear most people carry, though they rarely articulate it. It is not the fear of failure, nor even the fear of death. It is the fear of living an entire life that was never truly their own, a life shaped by invisible expectations, guided by borrowed desires, and sustained by routines that were never consciously chosen. At first, this fear is easy to ignore. The world is loud, structured, and persuasive. It tells you what matters, what to pursue, and who to become. And for a long time, you comply, not because you are weak, but because the system is designed to feel natural. But something begins to shift as awareness deepens. The roles you once inhabited so effortlessly begin to feel heavy. The goals that once motivated you begin to feel strangely hollow. You move through your days, completing tasks, fulfilling obligations, yet beneath it all, there is a growing sense of distance between what you are doing and who you are. This is not dysfunction, it is the beginning of perception, and perception, once awakened, quietly begins to dismantle control. Modern society rarely acknowledges this shift. Instead, it reinforces the opposite. It rewards constant activity, visible success, and measurable achievement. Youth is celebrated for its speed. Productivity is praised for its output, and identity is often reduced to performance. In such an environment, stillness appears unproductive, questioning appears inefficient, and withdrawal appears like failure. Yet what is often misunderstood is that inner development does not follow the same metrics as external success. It cannot be tracked through promotions, possessions, or public recognition. It unfolds in silence, often invisible even to those closest to you. This is where the first tension emerges, the tension between outer validation and inner truth. Most people resolve this tension by leaning further into the system. They work harder, distract themselves more effectively, and silence the discomfort. But a smaller number of individuals do something different. They begin to observe, not just their surroundings, but their own participation in them. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This insight points directly to the mechanism of control. What we do not examine, we unconsciously obey. The matrix, in psychological terms, is not simply an external structure, it is an internalized one. It exists in habits, beliefs, and identities that were never consciously questioned. And so, the shift that dissolves its power is not rebellion, but awareness. The first stage of this shift can be described as the recognition of the construct. It is subtle, often beginning with discomfort rather than clarity. A person may find themselves questioning routines that once felt normal. They may notice how much of their thinking is influenced by comparison, expectation, or fear of judgment. There is a realization, not intellectual but experiential, that much of what they have been pursuing was conditioned rather than chosen. This realization does not immediately liberate them. In fact, it often creates a sense of disorientation because once you see the structure, you can no longer fully belong to it in the same way. There is a scene that captures this moment quietly. Someone sits alone late at night, long after the noise of the day has faded. The phone is silent, the distractions are gone, and in that stillness a thought arises almost uninvited. If no one were watching, would I still be living like this? It is a simple question, but it carries weight because it reveals the extent to which life has been shaped by observation rather than intention. From this recognition emerges the second stage, the withdrawal of psychological investment. This is often misunderstood by others. From the outside, it may look like disengagement, The individual becomes less reactive, less eager to participate in superficial competition, less concerned with proving themselves. But internally, something precise is happening. They are no longer feeding the system with unquestioned attention, and attention, in many ways, is the currency of control. Friedrich Nietzsche once observed, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But the inverse is equally important. When the why is absent or inherited rather than discovered, even the most structured life begins to feel unbearable. As this realization deepens, the individual begins to conserve their energy. They become selective. Not everything deserves a reaction. Not every opportunity deserves pursuit. This is not detachment in the sense of indifference. It is detachment in the sense of clarity. This phase often includes solitude, not forced isolation, but chosen distance, because it is difficult to hear your own thoughts when surrounded by constant noise. In solitude, suppressed questions begin to surface, and with them, a different kind of intelligence emerges, not analytical, but reflective. The third stage is the reconstruction of identity. This is where the shift becomes more deliberate. The individual begins to redefine themselves not by roles, but by values, not by external labels, but by internal alignment. Jung referred to this process as individuation, the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche into a more coherent whole. It is not about becoming someone new, but about uncovering what was always there beneath layers of adaptation. This stage is not comfortable because it requires letting go of identities that once provided security, the successful persona, the agreeable personality, the version of self that was easily accepted by others. In their place, something less defined but more authentic begins to emerge. Decisions are made more slowly, but with greater honesty. There is less urgency to impress and more interest in understanding. Another scene unfolds here. An individual walks through a familiar space, a home, an office, a place they have known for years. Everything is the same, yet their perception has changed. Objects that once symbolized achievement now feel neutral. Conversations that once felt engaging now feel repetitive. It is not that the world has changed, it is that their relationship to it has shifted. And in that shift, control begins to loosen. The fourth and final stage is the acceptance of existential responsibility. This is where the transformation reaches its depth, because stepping outside of unconscious patterns does not lead to immediate comfort. It leads to responsibility. The responsibility of choosing consciously, the responsibility of facing uncertainty without the shield of conformity, the responsibility of living in alignment with truth, even when it isolates you. Viktor Frankl wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But in this context, the change is not reactive, it is intentional. The individual no longer waits for the world to validate their direction. They become the source of their own orientation. This does not mean they reject society entirely. It means they are no longer defined by it. This is the point at which the matrix loses its psychological grip, not because it disappears, but because it no longer dictates identity. The individual can participate without being consumed. They can engage without being controlled. They have, in a sense, stepped outside the automatic. As this awareness stabilizes, another dimension quietly enters the frame: mortality, not as a distant concept, but as an immediate reality. Time, once taken for granted, begins to feel finite. And with that realization, priorities become clear. The question is no longer, what should I achieve, but what is worth my time while I am here? There is a final scene. A quiet room, perhaps in the later stages of life. The noise of ambition has long faded. There are no more roles to perform, no more expectations to meet. Only reflection remains, and in that reflection, the measure of a life is not found in its conformity, but in its authenticity, not in how closely it followed the script, but in how honestly it diverged from it. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely," and perhaps this is the ultimate shift, the willingness to see oneself clearly, without distortion, without performance, without escape. Because in that acceptance, there is a kind of freedom that cannot be granted or taken away by any system. The psychological shift that dissolves control is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It unfolds quietly, through awareness, through questioning, through the gradual alignment of life with truth. It is not about escaping the world, but about no longer being unconsciously shaped by it. And once this shift occurs, something subtle but irreversible happens. You begin to live not as a reflection of what is expected, but as an expression of what is real. If this perspective resonated with you, consider staying connected. There are deeper layers of understanding still waiting to be explored.